What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Radiovania's DC Extended Universe in Review. It's finally happening, John. It's finally
in
happening.
memoriam.
In memoriam, yeah. Well, so we might not ever get another one of these fuckers ever again. But we're here to pay tribute.
We're supposed to get one this year.
Oh, that's right. Wonder Woman 84. That's fun. So we'll have that to look forward to.
That's the last confirmed one that we've actually seen a trailer for.
And it could would you agree with me in saying that it could be the light at the end of the tunnel? It
could be the best one. Yeah.
It could be. Well, if you're not familiar with the show, that's good because this is an entirely new show. It's going to be a little different. We're going to structure it a little bit differently. But basically what John and I decided to do is because of the old Rona, because of quarantine and self-isolation, we've got some time to watch some movies and we've got time to call each other and discuss things that we can't discuss in person because of everything that's going on. And a theme in Radiovania over the history of our show since did you know we started this in 2016 or 20? I think it was like maybe late 2015, early 2016.
Late 2015 because
Force Awakens.
It was right before Force Awakens, but it was also right before BVS because BVS was March of 2016. So we were excited for both of those movies, and that's kind of how our friendship flourished. And little did we know that one of those movies would suck.
And here we are 5 years later after the start of Radiovania. It only seems fitting to go back through, to rewatch and decide where they rank and how we feel about them after some time has passed. You know, we've grown a lot in the last 5 years, especially the film universe. You know what I mean? Like we've had Marvel movies, we've had Star Wars, the new trilogy, we've had all the rest of the DC stuff. That the cinema blockbusters have changed over the last 5 years, and that's no doubt. And I think this is going to be a really fun introspective.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll be good to do this as well because we have some really bad takes from our early episodes where we would go see a movie and then we'd rate it super high or we'd be really high on a certain performance. So it's good to get a little separation from it and kind of reassess because I think our original BVS pod, we were a lot more friendly to it than we should have been. So it'll be nice to get our honest thoughts on it when we do that as the next episode.
And if you guys want some extra credit, home audience, feel free to go back to whatever episodes where we did review these films because they're all still live on podcast platforms and you can hear our original thoughts and contrast them to now.
Yeah, but please don't hold it against us. We were just kids.
Yeah, we're so young. Yep. So young. John, you might be asking, what are the movies that we are going to be rating and reviewing in this series?
Why don't you tell us?
Man of Steel, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League, Aquaman, Shazam, and Birds of Prey, which you haven't seen yet, correct?
I still have not seen it. I'm actually just going to wait until I have to watch it for the pod. So I will have only seen it once when we talk about it, but I think that would be cool.
I was going to suggest that you do that. I think that that's a great idea because then you'll have the buildup of all this other stuff. And I think it'll be interesting to have my takes from when I saw it in theaters and then your take as a fresh pair of eyes. So, yeah. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get into the very first movie. And we've got some ideas here. I'm going to launch into some, basic facts for you. The Man of Steel, released on June 14th, 2013, John. 2013. Can you believe that movie came out that long ago? That's crazy.
I remember seeing this in the theater, and this was almost a full calendar year after The Dark Knight Rises came out. So I was like, oh, heck yeah, they're going to do a Superman movie now. I was one of like maybe 5 people in the theater, so clearly the hype wasn't as high. Or maybe I just saw it really late. Yeah, I also didn't see it opening weekend. All the guys went and saw it, and I was on a family vacation. So I think I went a couple weeks later. So maybe I just missed the initial rush.
That's possible. I remember seeing this in the theater with a few friends of ours, and we all went to Walmart before the movie, and we bought Superman tidy whities with like the red and the yellow and the blue strap with the Superman logo right on the dick, and we wore those over our jeans to the theater.
Did you go
and
with
then
John?
We all wore. I went with John Larson and Drew DeFawcett. I think was our squad.
I was supposed to go to that.
Well, I remember that theater experience was pretty lit. Like there were it was packed to the gills. I remember it was back in the days before assigned seating theaters, so we waited in line to see it, like make sure we got good seats.
We would have been a lot closer friends, dude, because I would have seen that with you.
We probably would have. We would have, and then we would have been along for this whole ride together, from stem to stern, from start to beginning.
It's okay. We saw the most important ones together. So.
That's true. We did. So actually, I think this might be a good part since we just talked about like our history with Man of Steel. Can you give me, because you're the DC guy between the two of us, what's your history with DC, with like DC in general?
Okay, so I was hoping that you would ask this. If not, I was going to bring it up. But in terms of the comics, I've always leaned more towards DC, which in an MCU world is kind of like heresy to admit to people, until you actually get them to read some of those books and they're like, okay, actually, yeah, these are pretty dope. I feel like when I was growing up, it was always like Marvel was second fiddle to DC. Like when I was growing up,
everyone was always like DC comics are the best, Marvel comics are like whatever at best. And it wasn't until the MCU when that started to flip flop, at least at least for like my view of the public conscious. I don't know.
Right. I agree, and I remember that very vividly too. And I think the reason because of that is Warner Brothers did a really good job of releasing animated content for DC to our generation when we were kids. So Batman the Animated Series reruns, the Justice League cartoon. The Justice League cartoon and Batman the Animated Series were my first introduction to the DC universe. And then as I got older, I began to read some of the comics. I would say probably in like early middle school is when I started to really dive into reading like different collected stories as opposed to just scattered single issues. I would go visit Cal and he'd be like, here, this is Blackest Night by Jeff Johns. It's about dead DC heroes that come back to life as zombie Green Lanterns. And I was like, oh, cool. And I'm like 11 reading these things. And that's when I read like Long Halloween, which is still like my first full Batman story that I read in comic form. And that's why it's still probably my favorite.
It's my favorite too.
Yeah, so that's kind of like my history of how I got started. So that love of that character universe was really started with the cartoons. And since I loved the cartoons, those are the books that I would gravitate towards at a comic shop. And then right before we had the MCU really take off, we still had those Dark Knight movies. So we had Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And that was like brought Batman to the forefront again, which I was really cool with. I was very excited about that. And that just continued to kind of develop. And I still read a majority of the books that I read from the comic shop are still DC based. Just because the Marvel continuity is something that I wasn't raised on. So it's a little confusing for me. It's hard to dive in, but there's still like a lot of great Marvel books. I just know more about the DC universe than Marvel. So I don't like to say that I like one a lot more than the other. I would say I'm just more attached to DC because I know more about it. And, I'm really attached to the Batman character in the Batman universe. But I like to live in a world where all comics are good. So that's kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, and you've always been, in the entirety of Radiovania, you've always been the DC guy, the guy wherever I have lore questions or comic questions, I always turn to you. Yeah. And so I there's going to be a recurring segment on this podcast called Zach Has Questions for John.
I like it. And I also when I was rewatching Man of Steel, I was like, I have beef with some of this stuff because I have such a strong affinity for how I was raised on Superman in other forms of medium. And that's not a bad thing to take risks and do new things. But I've found it's like ingrained in my DNA in the same way that like I have problems with some of the new stuff they do in the Star Wars movies. So
yeah, understandable.
Yeah. So when you got questions, throw them your way. I'll try my best to answer them based on my prior knowledge.
I've got at least a couple written down here. Zach Has Questions. That's the name of the segment, but we're workshopping a title for that. It's not as creative as Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down, which I'm sure you might have a couple for me here on this pod.
Every now and then I might just throw one at you.
That's fine.
World Engine. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh, let's wait till we get there, buddy. Let's wait till we get there. Okay. Directed by Zack Snyder and written by David S. Goyer, and the story by David S. Goyer. Also, there's a credit for Christopher Nolan as a story consultant. I mean, it just says story on IMDb, Chris Nolan. And then also on the credits for writers, it's Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, which are just, the creators of Superman. So that's purely ceremonial, I guess.
From Cleveland.
Both of them? Jerry Siegel and Shuster?
Yep.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Or at least they were working together in Cleveland when they wrote the character. They were living in like a studio up in Cleveland. So there's like a little tiny park somewhere in Cleveland that I still need to go to where they have like a plaque for them or something.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
So Cleveland is basically Metropolis. Yeah.
Cleveland is Metropolis. So if
it's
Cleveland is
Metropolis
Metropolis,
after
that means
Zod
that
destroys it. Yeah.
If Cleveland is Metropolis, that means that Cedar Point is Gotham City.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because that's how geography works in the Snyderverse.
Exactly. Oh, we'll get there, buddy.
I hate
we'll
that
get there.
so much. I hate it so much.
Get there.
I'm getting mad already.
I know. Released on June 14th, 2013, like I said, a production budget of $225 million and a domestic box office take of just shy of 300 million, an international box office of 376 million, making it a worldwide box office of $667 million.
So barely profitable.
It's the 17th all-time domestic box office for Warner Brothers movies, and
behind
it's
Potter.
the 103rd. There's some Potter up there. There's probably some other DC films. All time, it is. This stat is stupid, but I wrote it down anyway. It's the 131 all-time grossing movie of all time.
Nice.
So
made the top 150.
He made. That's kind of like getting bronze, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of fucking movies out there.
I mean, this movie's no Aquaman. It definitely didn't rake in that cash. That wet the balloon.
Not. Yeah. It's shiny treasure from Davy Jones' locker.
Yep.
Okay, John, tell me what you think about the movie. Just your overall opinions, like short and sweet. Just lay it all out on the table. What did you think of Man of Steel?
Okay, so I've only ever actually seen this movie probably a fistful of times, including I saw it once in the theaters. I think I bought it on an Amazon Prime sale on DVD, and that's what I watched it on yesterday. So I've maybe seen it a total of 5 times, maybe. When I rewatched it, I found myself still really enjoying the parts that I enjoyed 7 years ago. I think the description that I gave my mom when I saw it originally was everyone else in the movie besides Superman is really cool because they're all really great actors. And I think I still stand by that point for the most part. I really find myself enjoying the flashback sequences the most, as well as the beginning of the movie. The third act for me, as will be a recurring theme on this entire podcast, is where I kind of lose interest. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But overall, I did enjoy rewatching it. It was nice to watch it again. It had been a while. And it reminded me of how optimistic I was about the future of Henry Cavill as Superman. And then to see where we go from here is actually kind of sad to think about in retrospect, because I think he did really dirty. But yeah, that's kind of my summation of it.
Right. So when this movie first came out, like I said, we were hyped for it. Let us not forget, we can't talk about this movie without talking about the trailer.
The Lord of the Rings music.
No, I'm talking about, there were 2 trailers that released, one with Jor-El's talking and then one with Pa Kent talking.
Yes. Yeah, I remember those. Those are great.
And there's the Russell Crowe one where it has the, I would say pretty famous line from this movie at this point, where it's like, they will race behind you. They will stumble, they will fall, but in time they will join you in the sun. And
I have the whole quote. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, give it to me, dog.
All right, I'm going to pretend to be Russell Crowe. You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Cal. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders. Yeah,
dude. Part. I mean,
that part's hype.
That trailer. I remember seeing it on my fucking whatever terrible internet that I had in Lebanon, Ohio at the time. And it probably took forever to buffer. And I pulled it up, and I remember like that trailer still gives me chills. That line gives me chills. Like I think that is because I saw that and I was like, okay, we're going to get a Dark Knight level quality out of this film. Like we're going to get Superman done in a very like realistic, grounded way. And as a person that never really related with Superman, that's what I was looking for, was something more gritty level. And more grounded. Yeah. And taking it in a different direction that I wasn't expecting. And so,
oh boy, did they.
Yeah. So with the hype of the trailer and then seeing the movie on opening night and getting, dressed up for it and wanting to have a good time, I came out of this movie super fucking high the first time I saw it. Like I remember thinking like this might be one of my favorite superhero movies ever made. And I saw it a couple times in the theaters. I really enjoyed it. I bought it on Blu-ray when it came out. I must have seen this movie collectively like maybe 10 times.
Okay.
Maybe even more, because I remember this was one of those first Blu-rays that I really started collecting like superhero movies for, and I would rewatch this like while I was doing homework. And so movie is like this is a movie that's that I remember a lot of. Like I could tell you what's going on for most of the thing. But last night, going through it with a critical eye and trying to point out things that I like and things I didn't like and taking notes. It's got some weird stuff. Like you said, the third act kind of it's a lot of action with not a lot of emotion. And that's always like a sin for me in action movies, is like Marvel does a really good job of having their action sequences mean something in the greater scheme of the movie.
Yeah. Or even Nolan, who is like the king of third acts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's what is always shocking to me when I go back and watch this is, maybe he wasn't that hands-on with the script, but it's like you compare the third act of The Dark Knight or even the other two, The Dark Knight Rises or Batman Begins, to the third act of this, and you're just like, there's so much more emotion packed into those Batman movies than there was to this one. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the emotion of this movie is front loaded. And that's what kind of hurts the rewatch for me.
Yeah. And, but the first two acts I think are really, really strong. And I think that there's a lot of great character stuff. I really like Henry Cavill in this movie. Like, I think that I think what he was going for was kind of like a Captain America, like a Chris Evans Captain America. Like he's like kind of like the poster child for like, he's just a good guy all around. Like he doesn't really do anything bad. He's always kind of, he's trying to smile at all this.
Yeah.
Right, but I really liked his portrayal of Superman. Like I really did. I that's one of the biggest things going back and looking at this movie, because like you said, having the foresight into knowing where the DCEU goes from here, like, man, they just never give him enough shit to do. Like I think that when Henry Cavill is when he's doing things and emoting and giving, saying his lines and like has time to actually be fucking Superman, I'm like really into it, and I really, really dig it. And it bums me out knowing where it goes from here, because it only gets worse in terms of Superman's portrayal.
Yeah, I remember 2 years ago or so, before he quit, essentially, they were talking about how Jeff Johns was going to write the Superman script for the next Man of Steel installment. And I was very excited for that. And they were going to possibly have Matthew Vaughn direct it, who did Kingsman and First Class. And I was super excited for the concept of that, because Jeff Johns has written so many great Superman stories. And he actually worked for Richard Donner as an intern. And Richard Donner directed Superman 1 and Superman 2 from the 70s. That would have been almost like a perfect hybrid of like nostalgic Superman with like modern effects, which would have been so dope. And it just never happened.
Yeah. Instead, we got Man of Steel.
Yep. Yeah.
But all right. Well, John, without further ado, let's get into the plot of this movie. Give me the story. Spin me a yarn. Why don't you?
Okay. All right. So Man of Steel. This is. Let me tell you a story, kids.
I'm so ready. So ready.
We open up on a paradise world called Krypton, and there's a guy who looks like Maximus from Gladiator. His name is Jor-El, and he is a scientist. And the movie opens with his wife screaming really loudly while she gives birth to a baby. It's very interesting. There's like space robots that are helping give birth, and he seems pretty happy. And then we cut to a scene with like a council where all these people are wearing like Oprah Winfrey Wrinkle in Time headdress type things, and he's telling them that the planet Krypton's gonna explode because he's the top scientist, and they're like, "Nah, dude, we've been here for so long, it's fine." And he's like, "You've tapped all of our resources. We need to go out and explore the cosmos like our ancestors did." And then boom, like in classic DC fashion, the wall blows up, and some guy comes in and interrupts the conversation. And it's General Zod, and he's got a really bad haircut, but he's menacing as hell. And he comes in. What?
I'm gonna interject here already.
Okay.
I don't mind Zod's hair. Like I think that it like people have brought up that before that it looks very like militaristic. Like it looks like that's
Maybe
like the
Nazis.
cut you get when you get.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, soldiers get their hair buzzed, or they just do like, they do quick cuts to like make sure that they can get like
helmets. But he has like gray
I'm
frosted tips later.
Michael Shannon?
Yeah.
No, he does. A gray frosted tips.
Yeah, like the spiky bangs that hang down on his head have a little gray tint to them.
I think that's just his hair being gray. Frosted tips
that's
is not what
not
you're thinking.
Michael
That's
Shannon's
like
hair.
Michael
Shannon's hair is like very luscious. They definitely shaved his head and gave him a wig.
They did.
Gotta be.
No way. At least a dye job or something. But like, there's no way that he was. I don't know. I think that's his real hair. They probably just color corrected it.
Yeah.
But I want to say, I'll interject here for the first little bit. My first note was Russell Crowe is acting so hard and he didn't need to. Like, I really like everything.
He's giving
with
a
Russell Crowe
gladiator performance. Yeah, he's going for that Oscar for sure.
But Man of Steel.
You know who else is going for the Oscar in this movie? Michael fucking Shannon. And boy, does he really throw it out there.
I love it, dude. I love Michael Shannon as Zod. I think that villain is like, this is my first Zach has questions for John segment. So
go for it.
We'll work on a theme song, but I want to know, what is Zod like a very good Superman villain?
Yes.
Like, is he?
Yes.
Okay, so he's like he's like up there with like Lex and Doomsday and like all these big names. Like he's a big name in the Superman universe.
Definitely. They are also, because of their related bloodlines of being Kryptonians, occasionally will team up to fight people, So like, let's say Mongol, the war world leader, he wants to destroy Kryptonians as a whole, those that survived. Then maybe Zod and Clark will team up to make sure that their race survives. But yeah, Zod's a great recurring villain / frenemy. His dynamic with his dad is really cool. That's always been an interesting part of it. Zod is definitely Zod and Jor-El, like their friendship.
Oh, really?
And former. Cool. Yeah, that's always been a cool thing.
Because that one of the things I really liked in this opening scene is like their back and forth, where it's like, he says something like, I would have followed you, but not this monster you become. So there's immediately like a back and forth between them that you get the sense that they're like friends, or
they are the DC equivalent of Magneto and Xavier. Does that make sense?
Cool.
Yeah. I would say Zod is like a top 3 Superman villain for sure. Okay. Because he's the villain of Superman 2, and he's played by Terrence Stamp, which is a really fun, campy performance as Zod. You should check that out too if you haven't watched that in a while. Michael Shannon's dank.
Cool. Yeah. So here's another thing is that like I've never seen any of the Richard Donner Superman movies. Like I think I've maybe only seen clips of the first one. Like the famous scene with like the helicopter and everything. Like I feel like I've seen like a lot of that movie just in passing on like, whatever, YouTube or trailers or blah, 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 blah. I feel like I've seen a lot of that movie's like clips, but I've never watched all of the Superman Donner movies straight through.
Yeah, we'll talk about those a little
that
bit
was
more towards the end in terms of like a little history lesson.
And that was my thing, like coming into this, where I thought Zod was fucking awesome from the get-go. Like I thought he was it's a great thing to pit Superman against because it's bloodline, it's heritage, it's family, but it's also like he's a maniac. So it's like, how do you balance these two things? How do you balance wanting to be, feeling connected to the species, but also not agreeing at all with his fundamentals? And I think that Shannon plays the role so well, because he's like I said, it's going to keep going back to, I like how they set him up as very military and very he's more general in this than I think maybe ever. But I have no history with the character.
Right. But yeah, no, that was a good question. So anyway, diving back into the story.
Yeah.
So Zod wants to purge the bad bloodlines because he's mad at the council. Jor-El's mad at the council because they aren't listening to his scientific mind. So an all-out civil war ensues as the planet's about to explode. Jor-El jumps on some Avatar-like bird and flies to the tank where they keep the Codex, which is a skull where they make artificial babies because Krypton stopped believing in natural birth so that they could pre-assign roles to people. And the Codex has the registry of citizens that Zod wants. It's really cool. Jor-El's got this robot friend named Kellex, which is deep cuts from the comics. He helps out Superman at the Fortress of Solitude in the comics and the cartoons. So I was glad that I got to see Kellex. But anyway, Jor-El kidnaps the Codex. He takes the skull and puts it in his pocket. And then he flies back to his house while he's being chased by Zod's helicopter guys. And there's like a lot of zoom shots from Zack Snyder where he zooms in on something and then he zooms out and then he zooms in.
He loves that
again.
shit, dude.
And I hate it so much. It gives me a headache. So he gets back to his place and he uploads the Codex into Clark's cells, into his DNA. Or Kal-El, sorry. He's not Clark yet. So the skull disappears as it's being downloaded into the baby.
What's funny here is that they clearly show what he's doing, but then later on in the movie they treat what is happening almost like a reveal.
Yeah.
But it's not, because we already know what's happening. It's a reveal for Zod and his team, but like we already know what the fuck is happening. So
I don't know what kind of irony
I like
is.
this.
If that's like dramatic irony, I think, is when you know everything but the characters don't.
I guess. But for me, it was just like, okay, well, we probably could have had Zod just learn this off screen and not necessarily need to have like six. Again, there's another thing we'll come back to, and maybe this entirety of this series, but editing, I think, is a huge problem in the DC movies, where there are things that you do not, there's things that they should be showing that they don't. And there's things that they are showing you that they could have probably just fucking left as a deleted scene. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like Jolly Ranchers.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. So Jor-El defends his citadel against Zod's forces. They track him back there. And Lara El, who is, by the way, a stunningly beautiful actress. And she was crushing it too with her like 4 minutes of screen time. I thought she was dope.
I don't know who she is. Have you seen her in anything else?
I have not, but I really enjoyed it because normally Superman's Kryptonian mother doesn't get a whole lot of love. It's Ayelet Zurer. She's I don't want to botch.
God.
Yeah, I don't
she's in
botch
fucking.
that.
She was in Vantage Point. She.
Oh, nice! I remember that movie.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
We gotta keep this ball rolling.
Yeah.
So Zod and Jor-El have this cool fight, and they're disagreeing about the basis of their moralities and how to best take care of Krypton, while Lara is getting the spaceship ready, which is a very emotional goodbye. Jor-El sees it succeed as it launches off, and then Zod stabs him, which is interesting. Normally, Jor-El and Lara just blow up and hold each other in most Superman canon, but to have Zod murder him is actually an interesting twist.
And I love how Russell Crowe plays this too, because he gets stabbed through the stomach with like this giant fucking sword, and he still looks at the ship,
Yep.
And it's really
not
powerful
about
because he's like, he's like, if I die, I don't give a fuck. He's like, my son is the only thing that matters to me right now. And like that shot of him looking up, because it's like it holds on him for like 10 seconds as Russell Crowe gets to like keep looking at the ship and then slowly look down at Zod and meet him eye to eye. And it's so cool. Like it's that's a chill moment for me for sure.
Yeah. So then the ship escapes. He tries to blow it up. But then the rest of the Kryptonian army that isn't part of Zod's army shows up and stops them. And they arrest Zod and company. So then we flash back to the council. or not flashback, you know what I mean? Like jump back to that scene.
Yeah, we jump forward to the.
Yeah, so the next scene. Yeah, so they're sentencing Zod and his crew to the Phantom Zone, which is pretty canonical with what happens in comics and in the Dick Donner movies. We get the great "I will find him" delivery from Zod to Laura L, which is so iconic and great. And then they wrap them in space dongs and they send them up into this ship. And this is the problem that I have with the Kryptonian Council that they do in this movie, but they don't do in any other iteration. Normally, the Phantom Zone, they blast them either with the Phantom Zone projector, which just traps them in the Phantom Zone, like it teleports them there. Or in the Dick Donner movies, they put them in this giant mirror that just spins in the Phantom Zone forever. Right. In this movie, they're like, hey, we're going to freeze you and give you a ship. And then we're going to send you to the Phantom Zone. Because we're not going to leave anyone on board to protect you as prisoners. We're just going to give you this ship with a phantom drive. They send them off into the Phantom Zone. And it's like, whose fucking great idea was that? Because that's not going to work at all.
Yeah. So it would have made so much more sense. And this is another, I have this as a Zach has questions for John way later in the list of plot, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. Like, how the fuck does the Phantom Zone even work? Because
it's a pocket dimension.
Okay. So it's in it's in the universe somewhere. It's not like because I was imagining kind of like a Pokeball.
That's essentially what a pocket dimension is, right? So it's like it's a space that exists outside of the realm of normal space. It is a black hole. There's nothing there. There's like maybe rocks and debris floating around from other things that got teleported there. But in the comics,
they're able.
Yeah.
In the movie, they're able to they're unfrozen in the ship because of the distress beacon, right?
They're unfrozen in the ship because Krypton explodes. Apparently there was a transmitter on Krypton that was holding them in the dongs, as opposed to just actually sealing them in cement. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That's one of the problems with it. They just needed a plot device to give them a ship.
And I thought it would have been so much like I'm not a writer. Neither of us are writers, professional writers, but this is going to be a theme where we're going to suggest how they could have easily written themselves out of situations here. Mm-hmm. It would have been so much easier to just have them be launched into the Phantom Zone in those pods and and land or be floating in space. And then they find a deserted planet where they find the world engine and then they find a ship. It doesn't make any sense why they give them a ship to like be in. It's so weird.
Yeah. So the thing though is that the reason they're able, and later on we'll get to this, but they're able to escape the Phantom Zone because they wake up in the ship and the drive is installed in the ship as well. So that's stupid because that's like enticing them to just being able to get out on their own anyway. And normally they don't do that. They escape through other means. Either somebody breaks them out of the Phantom Zone or something else. But yeah, it's a really big plot hole that I kind of forgot about until I rewatched this, and I was like, oh wait, that's a terrible idea. It's like giving Hitler a tank in prison. They're like, here you go.
Now use this well. Only use it for shelter and not for guns.
So we move on. Oh, sorry. So then Laura L has this cool monologue with Kellex as she's watching Krypton explode. It's very sad. And then it blows up. And then the ship crashes in Kansas and we get the title, Man of Steel. So then we flash
There is no
forward.
title.
Oh, there isn't?
No, because this is when the Man of Steel followed the Batman Begins and Dark Knight.
Oh, it's like that.
It's at the it's hey, welcome to the planet. Thanks, Lois. And then it says Man of Steel. So it just cuts right from Superman flying to the ship, right?
Yeah. So we jump ahead in time to see a fully grown bearded Kal-El, also known as Clark Kent, working on Deadliest Catch out in the middle of the ocean. And he's like a rigger on a crab ship, and they get a distress call about an oil rig that's blowing up, and he swims over there really fast, and we get to see his beefcake muscles as he saves some people that are locked in there.
Fucking great, dude. Looking absolutely cut. It's amazing. Like, Henry Cavill in this movie is what I wish I could look like.
Right, as do a lot of people, I'm sure. And so he saves them, and then he's unconscious in the water, and we get a flashback within a flashback of his power montage his powers start to develop in school. He can see through things and hear everything. And young little Clark Kent in Kansas freaks out and goes and hides in the closet. And they call his mom, played by Diane Lane.
Before they call Diane Lane, he straight up fucking gives a 3rd-degree burn to that teacher.
No, that's true, on the doorknob. Yeah, she's gonna be like getting workers' comp from that for sure.
Yeah.
So then Diane Lane shows up, and Zach, can you tell me what's this character's name again?
Oh, it's Martha, John. It's Martha.
Martha, that's right. Sorry, I keep forgetting. So Martha Kent shows up,
right.
Played by Diane Lane, who's the fact that they keep recasting superheroes' moms and aunts as really hot people is actually like really cool. So she's gorgeous. I
love Diane Lane in this movie. I think she's
awesome.
Great. Like,
yeah, she's awesome.
She's
just nailing 3-pointers in the corner. You know what I mean? Like Kal-El just passes her the ball and she just from downtown and just sinks them. But she has that great part where, and this is what I really liked, is they kind of delve into the mythos of how he learned to use his powers. And she's like, imagine my voice is an island, drifting out to sea, focusing on just that one thing, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, so for sure. And it has that jump cut after she says that. She's like, make it small or whatever. And then there's like, isn't that where we get the shot of him floating in the water with the fucking whales?
Yeah, the CGI whales. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we get the whales and he swims to shore. And this is a problem that I have. There's a great song that they play during this that I want to look up, but it's musical. It's a soundtrack of him stealing clothes out of somebody's car. And like, I know he's naked and he needs to dress himself because he's in the Arctic, but Clark Kent would go up to the door and knock and ask if they had clothes that he could borrow. At least in my experience, he's too much of a Boy Scout that if he actually stole people's clothes out of their car, he would feel really guilty and he'd go back and apologize. And maybe he did. We don't see it, but so this is
maybe in the Snyder cut of Justice League. He goes back to that.
In the Joss Whedon cut, he goes back and he apologizes. But so I had a little bit of issues watching one of my childhood heroes steal clothes from people, but that's a minor thing.
Yeah.
So then
I got a little bit of trivia. I got trivia for you here. Because this scene is, again, there's the scene with him in the fishing boat with the catching the oil rig, it's like that's like a prelude to Captain America Civil War, where he grabs the helicopter and you see those fucking arms that are just like, oh my God, you just want to like kiss him. You know what I mean? And then, but in this, the fucking beefcake shot that you get is Cal getting out of the water, and he just looks so good, and he's huge. He's giant. Henry Cavill is huge for this. So there's a couple trivia facts on IMDb for this. So Henry Cavill refused to take steroids to muscle up for the role. He also refused any digital touch-ups or enhancements to his body in shirtless scenes. Cool. He said it would have been dishonest of him to use trickery while playing Superman, and wanted to push his body to the limit to develop his physique into one that was worthy of the character.
Nice. Way to go.
Pretty cool. And then it also says that after he shot his shirtless scenes, director Zack Snyder gave him a tub of ice cream and pizza to reward him for his effort for his shirtless scene.
What a guy. Yeah. So you can drool over Henry Cavill in this movie, because in the next movie I'm going to drool over Ben Affleck's tire workout scene. So, so our next scene is another flashback, and it is a bus going off the side of a bridge, and we get some character set up here of, I believe it's supposed to be Lana Lang, who's an old Superman character, and Pete Ross, who's the redheaded bully kind of guy. And so Clark is now like in middle school, maybe early high school. Bus goes off the side. He goes out the back and pushes it out, and then he saves Pete Ross. And then Pete Ross's family shows up to the Kent farm, and they're like, he did an act of God. This is a sign, Martha, and like all this shit. And Jonathan Kent, we get his introduction, played by Kevin Costner, and he's one of the highlights of the movie for me. I'd be curious to hear. I have a couple questions for you in a little bit, actually. Sure. But this scene is Kevin Costner goes outside, Clark's sitting on the truck, and this sets up the moral dilemma between the two fathers. And Jonathan Kent is talking about how people are afraid of what they don't understand, and he doesn't want Clark to reveal himself too early. And for a majority of the movie, it comes across as if he doesn't want him to reveal himself at all, which isn't necessarily the case. It's just a very touchy subject because he wants to make sure, that certain things happen in his son's life before he reveals this part of himself to the rest of the world, because it's going to change everything.
Sure.
So we get to see a part where he's like, I think this is when he shows him the ship too.
I want to interject really quick right in this scene. This is one of the, because this scene was part of the Jonathan Kent trailer, where it was like his quotes that they picked out for that specific one for the trailer for Man of Steel. And there's the line where it's, should I have what should I have done? Like, let them die? And he's like, maybe.
Maybe. Yep.
I don't care how, because I remember seeing criticisms that this was like, Jonathan Kent wouldn't have said that shit. Like he knows that.
He definitely would have.
Okay.
Yeah.
But regardless of that
Dick
criticism.
Donner one.
Yeah. But little trivia here I got for you. You might know this one, or you might have an input, but from IMDb it says Clark's line, quote, "Can I keep pretending that I'm your son?" And Jonathan's response, "You are my son," is taken from Superman Secret Origins by Jeff Johns.
Correct.
Is
that correct?
Is any other? That's what it says on IMDb. I didn't know if like anything from Secret Origin played into like what they picked and chose from history to put in Man of Steel.
I haven't read much of it, but if you're interested in it, it's a really cool reworking of the Superman origin story. So,
okay.
But I actually haven't read the whole thing, but I want to. But anyway,
he shows the ship.
Yeah, he shows him the ship, and he's like, "Can I just keep pretending to be your son?" And he says, "You are my son," which is some great Kevin Costner line delivery. I want to do a little side note here, Zach, that I always in my headcanon pretend that Jonathan Kent is just Kevin Costner's character from Field of Dreams, and he moved to Kansas from Iowa and changed his name and married Martha, and eventually him and Clark were going to build a baseball field together out in the field. But maybe that's just my headcanon.
Is that in the Snyder cut too?
Yeah, I don't know. But the point of Jonathan Kent in this scene is he wants Clark to get to the decision on his own, and this is throughout the movie, of when to reveal himself, what kind of man he wants to be, stuff like that. So this is all like the strongest part of the movie for me, is all these flashbacks, and like you said, first and second act are really good.
Yeah.
So then we move on to the introduction of the Key, who's Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams. Zach, question. Yeah. Do you like Amy Adams?
I do. I like Amy Adams quite a bit.
Okay. Amy Adams is one of my Hollywood crushes for sure. So I was really stoked to see that she was going to be Lois Lane. And I do think she does a really good job of honoring what the character is supposed to be. She's supposed to be kind of spunky, like doesn't take any shit, can kind of be like the toughest guy in the room full of men kind of stuff, which I think we see a lot of in this scene in the Arctic. Yeah. So she's meeting up with the United States military. There's a weird thing buried in the ice in the Arctic that they picked up on a sonar from NASA, and they're trying to figure out what it is. They think it might be a submarine, but they're like, it's too old. The ice around it is 20,000 years old or something like that. We get introduced to two supporting characters.
You would think
as
that.
Well.
You would think that these motherfuckers would be a little bit more curious about this thing, like. Amy Adams, like Lois Lane, sneaks off in the middle of the night and goes and infiltrates this thing with basically no problem whatsoever. Oh yeah, but all these military guys at this base are just like, nah, I can wait till tomorrow. Like this giant thing that's in the ice that might be millions of years old and could be like really important. Don't worry about it. We'll get that shit after breakfast. We got brunch and we got mimosas in the morning.
It's a bad look for the military for sure. But we get introduced to two supporting characters. We get Colonel Hardy, who is kind of like the no-nonsense guy, doesn't believe in aliens kind of deal. And then we get a really cool introduction of the character Dr. Emil Hamilton, who is the scientist with the beard and the glasses. And Emil Hamilton's actually a really deep cuts DC character who does a lot of science work. Notably for me is in the Justice League cartoon, he's one of the leads of Project Cadmus, which develops a lot of metahuman like super weapons to potentially oppose the Justice League if they ever turn bad. So it's really cool to see that inclusion of the character. But as we get to the third act, we will find out that like a lot of characters in the Snyderverse, he doesn't really care if they live or die. So,
right.
But it was cool to see him.
The doctor here reminded me a lot of, I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but Dr. Erskine or whatever it was from First Avenger, the doctor.
Stanley Tucci.
Yeah, Stanley Tucci, the guy that gives Steve Rogers like the speech in the tent. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. That guy's awesome.
But yeah, he is awesome. Tucci is great. But this guy kind of like reminded me of him, even in the look. Like he's got the shaggy hair, the doctor's coat, and the glasses. And I was like,
oh yeah, for sure. It's a little rip-off-ish, for sure.
Yeah. I was waiting for him to give Steve Rogers a speech the whole time about,
Here, Clark, here's a bottle of whiskey. Actually, wait, you can't drink it.
What am I doing? You have an operation.
Yeah. Okay, so then Lois Lane, like you said, sneaks out with no resistance whatsoever.
Right.
And follows Clark because she sees him walking around on her camera. She zooms in and sees him walking off. He infiltrates the ship. She's following him.
Speaking of the camera, we got our first big product placement in the DCEU right here, where there's like a hole in the ground and she throws her camera up first, and the focus on the shot is like on this camera for at least 5 seconds, and it's just got this giant fucking Nikon logo on it, and I'm like, oh boy. So we start to get some product placement in the DCEU.
Yep, there's gonna be a lot more of that for sure. So anyway, Clark has discovered that this is some type of Kryptonian ship, potentially. So he goes in, and his dad put this little key in his ship with the S logo on it, which stands for Hope. It's the House of L's sigil. It's a tiny little triangular shaped key that perfectly fits into a bunch of Kryptonian things. So this is clearly like, their all access key that a lot of different people have. So it was in his ship as a baby. Jonathan Kent gives it to him. He finds this perfect hole and he pushes it in there with a little resistance from this robot that's defending the ship. Mm-hmm. And Clark, once he uploads that, the key contains a ghostish version of his dad's subconscious. So his dad's able to project himself like Luke Skywalker into the ship. And he's able to have a conversation with Jor-El, and Jor-El gives him a little history lesson about how he's Kryptonian, where he comes from, all this stuff, tells him his name. Lois is kind of sneaking around. She's trying to take a picture of the same robot that attacked Clark, which we saw a couple minutes earlier, attacks people. So there's a little bit of like situational irony there, or dramatic irony there. And then it attacks her and stabs her in the gut, and Superman like crushes it into a ball. And then a guy who's on the run, he can't help but help people because he is Superman, and she's Lois Lane. She's pretty, and they're destined to be together. So of course he's gonna just like give her that doomy eyes look that he gives her, which is just really, really heart melting. And then cauterizes her wound. So line, first date.
a line here. I like this scene in general, but a line here that I don't like, that you might have some more input on. But he says, "I can do things other people can't." Mm-hmm. And I just never liked that line because it just seems so. I would have rather him just say like, "I can take care of it" or something like that. Like I just hate him saying like, it's so like, I don't know. Weird. That felt like something out of like X-Men 1, where like Xavier is like explaining to Logan like what he can do. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a nitpick, but it stood out.
So anyway, he cauterizes her wound, and then we cut to a voiceover of Lois Lane reading an article, and we see that Clark like dropped her off in the middle of the Arctic, which hopefully he didn't do that in the middle of the night, because she probably would have died or gotten eaten by a seal or something. But this helicopter finds her. He's escaped with the ship. The ship flies off, and all the Air Force people see it. And he doesn't get very far with the ship. He still parks it somewhere in the Arctic. I know the Arctic is big.
Well, he hits a mountain. Doesn't he hit like something and crashes it kind of?
I don't know if he crashes it. I just thought he landed it somewhere else in the Arctic, because it's supposed to be his fortress of solitude. But they did a bad job of setting that up too, because Zod finds it later on anyway and steals it. So as we have this voiceover, it transitions into our first scene at the Daily Planet, which is a big deal, where Lois is reading this to Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet, played by Lawrence Fishburne, who is just throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs in this movie, as like a not as snarky version of J. Jonah Jameson, maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Fishburne as Perry White and Perry White in general? What do you think?
Yeah, I like Morpheus quite a bit in this role. I think that he does. I think that obviously, and again, another theme here of Man of Steel's potential being kind of like let go in the coming movies. But like, I think that this movie has the best Lois Lane stuff in the DCEU. I also think it has the best Perry White stuff. I think that it has a lot of the best stuff for all of these characters, like especially not like main, I don't know, but like Diane Lane gets the best stuff to do in this movie. I mean, it's their origin movie, so obviously they're going to have more room to just shine as actors. But I like Perry a lot. I think he's fun and interesting. Like, I don't know the character. Like, I don't have a history with the character, but I was like, I get this guy. I think he's like kind of the likable, stern boss. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so he doesn't want her to print it. So she leaks it to this internet blogger guy.
This fucking dork.
Yeah, he's a huge nerd. And then we get
he sells her out immediately. Like,
I know. Lois Lane knows who this alien guy is, and she's like, God damn.
It's like, if you want to know something, you should ask Lois Lane. Definitely not me, though. Definitely not me. Aliens. Here's the person.
Yeah. So then we get to the sequence of Superman trying on his suit, with the Jor-El voiceover that we read earlier about the human race following him into the sun and how he will help them accomplish wonders. And this is set to him testing out how to fly, which is a really cool scene. He starts by jumping first and crashes, and but eventually we get to some cool stuff of him with the Hans Zimmer music flying around the earth. He drive-bys a thing of giraffes, and I think that would kill those giraffes in real life because he's going like supersonic. He definitely would have like ripped their head off on accident or something. But yeah, so he's flying around, which is pretty cool. And then this is where my notes start to get a little bad, so I'm going to be skipping things probably in terms of big plot points, but I still got the gist of the movie down. Yeah. So I think the next scene is the tornado scene.
Before we move on to the tornado scene, I'll say that moment, like the Jor-El and Kal-El in the ship talking, him testing his powers and the whole speech, like it's as good as it is. It's as good as the line is in the trailer. And I think that this is the moment for me. Like, this is the best scene of the movie. Like, nice. This is. I mean, we'll get maybe my answer will change later. Okay. I doubt it will. I think this is the highest high that the movie gets for me, where it's everything comes together. The visuals look great. The score is amazing. The Hans Zimmer score is awesome. I love the lines that they give Jor-El to say. I love Henry Cavill's facial expressions as he is flying. I think it's the most whimsical and Superman that this movie is.
Right. So then I think we get to the tornado scene, which is
right before the tornado scene is the thing where Lois finally tracks down that it's Kent. She goes to all the different people, and then she gets to Martha's house, and then she goes to the graveyard, and Superman just materializes behind her.
He just apparates there like in Harry Potter. Yeah. So we get this flashback scene where the Kents are driving in the truck, and a Henry Cavill is supposed to be playing a teenage Clark, I believe, which is kind of funny to watch because he acts like a dick. And he gets in an argument with Jonathan about, how they're not even his parents, so why does he have to listen to them, all that kind of stuff. And then this tornado happens because it's Kansas, so everyone's making their way to the overpass. Jonathan Kent is helping out. People get their babies and all this other stuff. And again, Jonathan Kent doesn't want his son to reveal himself too early in what he can do. And since there's a lot of people under the overpass, he goes back for the family dog, which bad on you, Martha, for suggesting to go get the family dog. But also I like dogs, so I don't want the dog to die. But I do also like Jonathan Kent a lot. So But he goes back and his leg gets caught and he doesn't give him enough time to escape. The dog escapes and then he gets killed by a tornado as he puts his hand up to tell Clark not to save him in front of everybody. It's a well-acted scene. I don't necessarily enjoy it.
I agree.
So here's my issue with
this. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So in other iterations of Superman, Jonathan Kent actually usually doesn't die. He's usually still alive because they don't typically double down on the fact that he lost his Kryptonian family and his Earth dad. Occasionally they will kill off Jonathan Kent, and Martha's usually always alive. However, for the most part, he's still alive in a lot of iterations. The most famous version of Jonathan Kent passing away that I can think of is in the Dick Donner one. They do it too. But the other iterations of Jonathan Kent passing away is either a car crash or a heart attack, which I think is a better use of him dying because it teaches Clark that there are things that are out of the realm of his control. This tornado thing, regular Superman would have flown over there in a second and gotten him. It's a little too stagey for dramatic effect, which is a little bit kind of like Zack Snyder's problem, in my opinion, is like overaction for the sake of nothing. They could have accomplished a very similar dramatic scene if they just would have had him have a heart attack while they were driving the car or something.
Yeah, here's the thing. My thoughts on the scene is that I think that overall, from like the structure of the scene is not terrible. I think that, it's a dramatic moment having Pa Kent say that, like, basically give a gesture to Cal and say, like, I don't want you to reveal yourselves to these people. It's not the right time. I don't trust that this is going to be a good thing for you. I don't think it was shot super well, and I don't love how long they hold on him holding his hand up. I think it just feels it just feels so heavy-handed.
It feels like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think that, and stop me if you think I'm wrong, I think an easy fix for this entire scene that would have made it so much more palatable for everybody is just making Clark Kent younger and not having him be Henry Cavill. Like, maybe keeping him the same age as the kid in most of the flashbacks, because then you believe that he wouldn't, like, rush over and do something. Like, he seems more helpless. But seeing a teen, late teen, maybe even 20-year-old Clark Kent, like, just seems so unbelievable in that situation.
Mm-hmm. I think that would help fix the scene. I think they should have just done what I suggested, though, where they have something that is out of the realm of Clark's control. I think it's a better lesson learned. But they still get the point across, I guess, is, the theme of this one is his Earth dad was trying to protect him until the last minute that he needed protecting. But so this is another problem that I have after this is I don't like that Lois Lane meets Kal-El before she meets him as Clark Kent. And I'm sure you might disagree because you might enjoy how it works in this movie, and they do it pretty well because she's an investigative reporter. Of course, she would figure out who he is. However, I just like the classic version of Superman where she knows him as Clark, and Clark's always trying to get a date with Lois, but she's not interested. She's interested in Superman, all that kind of stuff. And they actually, like, he's able to keep his identity a secret for a little while. Whereas in this one, she just, like, straight up knows who he is from the get-go because that's how she meets him.
Right.
I guess it works for this movie and ultimately for this universe because they try to get everything going so quickly, but it's not a decision that I particularly enjoy. So yeah. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
I don't hate it. I mean, I agree with you that I think it might have been more fun the other way around, but I think that for the universe that they were building out, they were like, when they pitched this movie in the original WB meetings, Zack Snyder probably said, like, hey, we want to make this a little bit more grounded and we want to make it seem like it could happen in real life. And that's a lot of the thing for the early days in the DCEU is that it's like, what would happen if real superheroes were in our real world? How would that play? And ending the movie with Superman deciding to have the secret identity is a little bit more believable than him going straight for the secret identity and then discover. It plays for this universe fine, but I can see it working your way a lot better.
So then we get another flashback, which I really enjoy. and I can't remember if this is after Zod shows up, so I might have it out. But I'm going to talk about the flashback first, and then we can move on. But it's a scene of bullies pulling Clark out of the truck and throwing him against the fence, and they want him to fight him, just like classic Peter Parker bully type stuff. And then they stop because they see that Jonathan and a couple other farmers of Smallville are watching everything unfold, and they walk off. Pete Ross helps Clark up, which is really touching to see. And then Jonathan has this really cool conversation with them that I really like. And this is one that I believe is in the Jonathan Kent trailer as well. And I'll read it for you verbatim, which is, part of me even wanted you to, but then what? He's talking about Clark hitting the kid. Would it make you feel any better? You just have to decide what kind of man you want to grow up to be, Clark, because whoever that character is, good or bad, he's going to change the world, which I think is a really cool line. It's actually one of my favorite lines in the movie, too. I'm also really, really biased toward Kevin Costner, so I think a lot of his scenes are really dope. But having the two fathers play such a prominent role of the story, both Jor-El and Jonathan Kent, I think is the best decision of this movie. So then we have. Right,
sorry, before we move on any further, it's after this. So we missed a little bit of a chunk of the movie. So after the flashback,
this is where I begin to lose interest in stuff. So you might have to fill me in on things.
Yeah. So there's the flashback with his dad, with Jonathan Kent dying, and then after that is the Phantom Zone thing. So there's the whole thing. So there's
which we discussed earlier.
Yeah. We discussed it. But yeah, they escape the Phantom Zone. They find out that Kal-El is nearby, and then I'm pretty sure that there is don't they do the broadcast before?
Yeah, I think I missed that too. Yeah, so he does this creepy horror thing where he turns off all the electricity on the world except for televisions and phones, and broadcasts the "You're Not Alone" in all different languages. And Zod is speaking to the planet Earth to turn in this alien who looks like one of them but is not one of them. And then he says to Kal-El directly that he's got 24 hours to turn himself in. So classic bad guy exposition, turn yourself in or else. Right. And then the lights come back on. But yeah, you're right. I totally missed that. But anyway, so then then the scene that I wrote a note down that I really think is ridiculous is he's worried about if he should turn himself in or not. So he goes to church to talk to a Catholic priest, and he's sitting in this bench, and right behind him is a stainless glass window of Jesus Christ. And he's like, I don't know if I should turn myself in, Father. And I'm like, okay, this overt Christ comparison is ridiculous. Because
Zack Snyder loves that shit, dude.
Yeah, but later on, Zack Snyder has the line where he talks about how evolution always wins. So it's pick a field to play in, Zack. Are you a creativist or are you an evolutionist?
I think his idea is that Superman is what a Jesus figure should be. That's why he does what he does. It's Christianity aside and religion aside, Clark Kent is supposed to be an actual savior, a savior living on Earth and is actually saving people. And so that's what he likes. He likes that Superman is a savior, but he doesn't. I think that he tries to incorporate that into realism. So it's not a spiritual leader. It's an actual physical embodiment of a holistic saving being. You know what I mean? I know it's complicated. It doesn't. I mean. I don't know what Zack Snyder's religious beliefs are, but I don't hate a lot of the allegories with making Superman seem like a Christ-like figure, because I think that it works when it's subtle. But Zack Snyder's problem,
pretty overt with that.
That's one of my things that I just don't like about Zack Snyder's films. I like Zack Snyder films. I think that they're dumb, fun, loud popcorn movies for the most part. I love Watchmen, Sucker Punch, 300 is great, but it's he's just very overt with his symbolism, and I think that that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so then after the Christ comparison thing, he decides to turn himself in, and the military's in the desert. I'm pretty sure by now the FBI has taken Lois Lane into custody too.
Yes.
Because the guy turned her in on TV that we talked about earlier. And he wants to talk to Lois, and they're like, she's not here. And he's like, don't bullshit me, General. And she's like,
I love that shot. Like the scene is fine in general, but yeah, the shot of him floating in the distance in the desert with the military, it's like, that's such a cool shot. That's another chill moment from where it's like Superman just appearing before the military. Super cool.
So then he's handcuffed, and Lois is like, can he hold you? He's like, no, but it makes him feel better. And talks about how the symbol on his chest isn't an S, it stands for hope, and she tells him that it's an S on this planet, which of course he would know that because he went to elementary school. So that was like a really stupid line.
I think she's just being funny with him. I don't think she's actually
being
trying
flirty,
to tell.
I know, but it's just like, he should have been like, yeah, I know, I went to school in Kansas. But all the generals are watching, so but yeah, he uses his X-ray vision to talk to all of them about, how he's like, he can see through the wall and stuff, and how they need to work together, and how he's not their enemy, and that he's going to agree to turn himself over, because the guy's like, I got orders saying that I should turn you over, and he's like, I think you should. So anyway,
it's a small line, but I like the general going, he's like, you could be carrying some sort of alien pathogen. He's like, I've been here 35 years, General, and I've not infected anybody yet. I like that line a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So did you know that the general was supposed to be Martian Manhunter?
Really?
Yeah, so Zack Snyder's plan for the Snyderverse that he has revealed is that by Justice League 2, we would have discovered that General Swanwick is actually Jon Jones undercover, and he's the Martian Manhunter. And that guy was going to play Martian Manhunter, which, like, the voice, when you listen to him, is actually, like, really perfect. But, again, it's something that never panned out. So.
I dig it. I mean, I think that would have been
But it also, if he's Jon Jones and he's an alien, he wouldn't have been as, like, mean to Clark Kent as he was, because he's also an alien refugee hiding from Mars. But anyway, that's just nitpicking about something that didn't happen. So then we, like, get to the scene of Lois and Clark are in the desert, and they're waiting for Zod to come pick up Clark. And then that officer woman, I think her name's like Feora or something, she like comes out.
Trivia.
Okay.
I got a little trivia for you about Feora. Gal Gadot was originally cast as Feora, but had to drop out due to her pregnancy. And Anjette Trieu was cast in her place. Gadot would later be chosen to play Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman. So she got the good end of that deal.
She really did. She lucked out hardcore.
Can you imagine if Gal Gadot was in that? Was Feora? I would be
bummed. Stupid. In retrospect,
for sure.
So anyway, they're like, apparently Zod wants Lois too, but I don't know how he found out about Lois. But she's like, the general also wants that woman, and she like points to her, and everyone's like,
so weird.
It's very strange. Like, I don't even know how he would know about her.
Yeah, this is one of the egregious things, writing decisions in this movie, where I can't think of any reason why she needs to be on that ship other than she's a plot device to get the ship. Yeah, to get information and to shut down the ship and then get Zod and the crew back down to Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I don't, unless Zod was watching the television broadcast and the guy's like, Lois Lane knows who this guy is. And Zod's like, I will find Lois Lane.
but even if that was the case, why would he bring her on the ship? This is just one of those things that I think no matter how you break it down, it's bad writing to get characters from one place to another.
Yeah. So they both get brought onto the ship. Clark gives her the little key to the everything that contains his dad. And he doesn't tell her what it's for. But eventually she's going to instinctively figure out how to work it. And he gets taken into the throne room. It's very Palpatine-esque. It's got this huge window. And he is not adapting to the Kryptonian, atmosphere that's inside of the ship, and starts to like pass out, and he gets weaker because he's been soaking up the yellow rays of the sun for 33 years. And so he's getting weak. He's coughing up blood, and Lois is like, help him. And then he has like this weird fever dream where Zod is telling him his plan while he's passed out from breathing in bad air. And he's like, I'm going to build Krypton on the bones of this planet. And like it switches to Superman standing on a pile of skulls and stuff. And Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Again, Michael Shannon's
As
acting his heart out, but it's a very weird setup for that discussion.
I don't, yeah, like I agree that it's weird, but putting the weirdness of it aside, it's alien stuff. We don't know how Krypton technology works for the most part. Like he could be projecting this into, because Cal is tied down onto the table while he's like talking to him. So it's like he could be projecting this into his mind to kind of show him what he's talking about. But all weirdness aside, I fucking love the visual of this. Like I love because they're on the Kent farm, and then there's like the nuclear blast, and then there's the skulls, and I just really like it. It's like the nightmare sequence. This is clearly the prelude to the nightmare sequence in BVS.
Definitely.
And I don't know. I dig the visual, and I like how weird it gets. That's just me as a weird. I like weird shit in movies.
Cool. So then Lois gets thrown in a cell, and they have the keyholes in the cells that they throw them in. So she just instinctively pushes the key into the hole, and Jor-El pops up and, explains that he's Kal-El's dad and stuff. And then he does the cool ghosty thing where he like leads her around the ship, which is actually a really cool like video game level type thing where it's like the AI is guiding you down the hallway. I remember it being very comical when I saw it the first time. And like I like how he like opens his hand and does like finger waves to like open and close doors and stuff like that, and tells her where to shoot and stuff. But all this is happening, and he changes the atmospheric composition of the ship to be more like Earth, so that everybody gets weaker and Clark gets stronger again, and he's able to bust out of his chains. Again, Zod was communicating him through a hallucination, I guess. So he's not in the room with him. He's somewhere else. He's on his way to Smallville. So he's not on the ship when Clark and Lois escape. Lois is in an escape pod that breaks, so Clark has to go save her after he talks to the dad. This is the last time that Jor-El and Clark talk to each other. And this is where we get the line where he's like, "You can save her. You can save them all." And then he like flies off and gets her. And the
as cheesy as crashes. It is.
Yeah.
As cheesy as it is, I like that exchange a lot. Like because he's like, strike that panel, and he breaks it, and then you see like the planet, and you see like Lois's ship falling.
Yeah, but then
I really
he floats
like all
out
of that.
And he makes a cross again. That overt Christ comparison thing
again
is just really dumb.
I know.
So then this is where you might have to take over plot device and filling in the holes, because this is where I start to lose interest in the movie, because it just becomes how much stuff can we destroy.
Well, here's the thing.
Fighting.
That's the thing, is that the last act of this movie can be from this moment to the very end of the movie to the Zod face off is, I don't even know if we need to like get into super details, because
let's not.
He saves Lois
save time, because I want other things to talk about. Yeah.
Right. He saves Lois. So here's the basics of it, right? Yeah, he saves Lois. Again, a scene that I really like is the saving of her, like grabbing her from the pod, and then like the slow spin down under the thing, and then like he senses something is wrong with his mom, and he shoots off immediately.
Yeah.
I really like that sequence. And then there's the fight at the Kent house, which eventually goes to Smallville.
They destroy all of the Kent house and Smallville, but the Kent house gets rebuilt in time for BVS, which is weird. Anyway, we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, so there's this huge fight. Zod has to go back because his mask gets broken, so he's out for the fight for now. So it's mostly Feora and this other big dude.
Because I do like that. I do like that exchange where he grabs Zod immediately because he knows that he's fucking with his mom, and then he's like beating the shit out of him while flying through a cornfield, and then he finally like breaks his suit down, and then he's like, "My parents taught me to hone my powers. You're experiencing everything all at once." This is the problem I have.
Like, don't tell him how you figured out how to use your powers.
Exactly.
Because then he's gonna figure it out. He's a military strategic like general. He's gotta figure it out. So you're like, "Oh, you gotta focus on one thing, you idiot," and then like he leaves, and then he figures out how to focus in on it later, and then ruins an entire city. But anyway. So
let me teach you, bud. Let me teach you how to do this shit.
Yeah, so essentially, like you said, they fight in Smallville. They wreck everything. We get product placements of IHOP and Sears and all this stuff. And they blow up like tanker trucks and things. And the military starts shooting bombs into the street of Smallville. Yeah. And like they show people taking shelter, but it just consists of like going in a barbershop and locking the door, which is like not going to protect you from a concussion missile at all. I remember seeing this in the theater, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, the entire town is destroyed, and this is Superman's hometown. But that's not the only hometown they destroy, Zach, because after this, we move on to the setup of the final part of the third act, I guess, which is that Lois catches back up with Clark after the Kryptonians leave and tells him that her dad said what to do with the ship, and they're going to work with the military to pretty much kamikaze drop a phantom drive into their ship because they set up the world engine with Zod's ship on polar opposites of the Earth, and they start terraforming it to be like Krypton. So we get sky beams and lots of rubble and like loud noises, and things are smashing. And the plan is for them to drop the bomb on Zod's ship after Clark destroys the world engine in the South Pole, because they're connected and it won't work unless he destroys it for some reason. So he gets down there and he's having a really tough time, like fighting off these octopus tentacles of the world engine and all this other shit. And there's a bunch, Lois and Hamilton and the other guy are on the plane, and they're trying to drop the kamikaze bomb. And then Zod, while this is going on, goes to the Arctic, finds the other ship, talks to Jor-El, and kind of like deletes him. And they actually have a really cool conversation there that I really did actually enjoy, where he's like, I wanted to, be friends. And essentially it's like a Xavier Magneto thing, but he takes the ship and they all get there. Eventually, like you said, we can kind of breeze through this so we can get to the final fight and the end of the movie, but they're able to succeed. He gathers enough strength and he destroys the world engine. And then Hamilton and Hardy die with Feora in tow on the C-17. And it blows up Zod's ship as Lois just happens to fall out of the blast radius. Clark flies all the way back to Metropolis and catches her. And then they kiss, and she has that line where it says it's all downhill after the first kiss, which it's also all downhill for the DCEU after this first kiss.
Yeah, very indicative line.
Which I thought was really funny foreshadowing. And then we get quite possibly my least favorite part of the movie, which is the entire city of Metropolis in the background is like already pretty much rubble, and Zod and Kal-El just go at it, and they just destroy everything. And this becomes the premise for the next movie, which we'll talk about at a later date. But really not much to dive into besides the fact that they have mass destruction because they're two superhuman beings. And then it turns into Zod, trying to threaten these people. But before we talk about this, is I do really like a line where he's like, my sole purpose is to serve Krypton, and without it, it's like you have broken my soul. So he's like unchained Zod at this point, so he's just going for blood now, which I think is really cool motivation for the character. I just don't like the execution of the fight. And speaking of execution, he starts to laser vision these people in a museum, and Clark's got him in the headlock, and he's like, won't stop, and he's like, you gotta stop, and he's like, never. So then Clark just snaps his neck and kills him and screams, which is really well acted by Henry Cavill. But I wanted to ask you what your thought on this decision was to kill Zod.
So before I talk about the actual decision, I'll just touch on, because I know we're breezing through the battle scenes to get to the very end, but I like the Zod Superman fight a lot. I think that visually what it represents, I think, is a little flawed when you consider that they're trying to build a universe. But looking at this as a standalone movie without trying to think about, where this goes or what could happen, trying to put myself back into 2013 and trying to visualize how I was feeling about this movie at the time, I really like that, because the whole movie is basically, the first half of this movie is incredibly slow. And it's a lot of character development, but they tease the fact that they never go full Superman until the very end, where you see this incredible being's powers. And I think that just taking this entire Zod versus Superman scene out of context, I think the action is so well choreographed. I love that you can tell exactly where everybody is at the time. I love that their punches, every punch means something. Like I know that they're
it also creates a shockwave that probably kills 30 people on a nearby apartment building.
It's fucking Ozymandias from Watchmen all over again. It's like just mass destruction. But
well, it is
again,
and that's the problem that I have with it is I don't know if he didn't think about it or if he wanted to make it really haunting, but like it's very, if you think about the actual ramifications for what happens from this fight, it's like they would not have recovered and rebuilt the city in the time that BVS happens. Like they would still be rebuilding that city. Like it's like what happens in Metropolis is like a million times worse than 9/11. Like the whole city gets 9/11 by the Kryptonians, essentially.
That's an entire sub discussion that I think we need to save for the next episode, because
definitely, for sure,
because the ramifications of this are huge. It's insane. Like it's absolutely undeniably insane. And I think that the criticism was, I think it's valid to say like Superman wouldn't be participating in this much destruction and shit. But at the same time, it's like they set this character of Zod up to be so not caring of human life that it kind of makes sense that, Superman is he's not trying to prolong the fight. He's trying to find a way to get Zod without killing him. And it just so happens that it takes so long and there's so much destruction. And
I just think Superman would have tried to move him away from the city. But also at the same time, Zack Snyder already nuked the city with the World Engine. So I don't know. Like, again, like when they have the kiss right before the fight, there's like a whole field of ash, and you look off in the distance and the buildings are like already destroyed. So it's like they go to a different part of the city that isn't completely knocked over yet, and then they ensue to knock the whole thing down. But another problem I have that we'll get to is the fact that at the end of the movie, he goes to the Daily Planet, which we saw fall over like 20 minutes earlier. And they just rebuilt it really quickly, I guess. I mean, we don't know what the time lapse is before he starts working there, but again, it would have taken a lot longer. It's fine that we disagree on the fight. I know you like it. The only thing I like about the fight is that it sets up the opening scene of BVS, which I really enjoy, from a different POV of what's going on during the destruction of Metropolis. So, but what do you think about the choice to kill Zod? Are you on board with it?
So here's the thing: is that I understand that there's a long history. This whole universe, the DC universe, is set. This is the first movie in the DCEU, and they immediately set up the fact that your heroes can kill. And there's a bad idea. There's a huge history of superheroes. Superman is probably the number one, where his whole thing is, I don't kill. I'm moral, like life is sacred, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. So here's the thing is that I'll say that I think we could probably get into more in our BVS discussion. Yeah. Strap yourselves in, folks, because that episode's going to be like 5 hours long.
Yeah, we might have to do that in 2 parts.
Maybe.
Because I'm going to have to pee in the middle of it, and then I need a mental break. But yeah.
But here's the thing is that, like, I am fine with the decision to have Superman kill Zod if they would have stuck to those guns, but they don't. And that's the thing is that, like, they don't stick to those guns. They don't make that scene feel very earned at all. Like, you don't set up the fact that Superman doesn't want to kill, so that when he does kill, I was just like, oh, okay, that's how he defeated Zod. And then after that, you feel the sadness in his voice and his scream about losing basically his last living relative, quote unquote relative, not like blood, but like, family,
for sure.
His lineage. It's
so until Supergirl shows up.
Sure.
and Crypto, the super dog.
Yeah. So I don't mind. I was okay with the decision, but I was also I was like, okay, now going forward, Zack Snyder and all of you DC people, you have to like really like justify this, and you have to make it feel like it belongs in this universe.
And they made it worse.
And they made it worse. So
I if they hadn't done BVS the way they did, I think I might be a little more on board with it. But given what we got and what we know, retrospectively, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it would have been cool if he was able to subdue him somehow. I don't even know how you would do it because at this point he's like
Right.
a madman unless he can find a way to send him to the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, John, is that we have to try and put all future bias aside. We have to try and review these movies as if we were reviewing them as they were coming out fresh, try our absolute best to not think about what's coming forward and only look at what we have now. You know what I mean?
Sure. That being said, I think he would have served better as like Loki to the DC universe, where like he's around and maybe occasionally teams up with them in the same way that he does in the comics. I think that would have been very interesting. But again, we get what we get, and we can't pitch a fit unless we want to. So then the last couple scenes, we can dissect them really quickly. Superman destroys a $12 million drone, which is another thing that I don't think Superman would do. I think he would have just gone to the Pentagon and asked them, as opposed to crashing the drone right in front of the car. And he's like, stop trying to find where I hang my cape, which at this point, we don't even know if he has a Fortress of Solitude yet, because Zod stole the ship that he was going to use as Fortress of Solitude. So I don't know. And they must have known he's from Smallville because the whole thing's in rubble. So I don't know the point of the drone. And then we get...
I don't know what you're about to say right now, but I'll just say it right out the gate. This is the worst scene in the movie for me.
Worst scene.
This scene, like the smashing the drone, him talking to the
I think he's really
general.
hot. Yeah.
Yeah. This didn't work for me in 2013, and it doesn't work for me now. Like this is like Space Leia. As many times as I want this scene to like do more shit for me and like actually like I'm like maybe this time it'll be a little bit better. It just never and it's such a bad way to come off of such a dramatic emotional moment with the Superman and Zod conflict and him like breaking down and the Lois hugging and the desolation of Metropolis, to then get this like MCU level comedic scene where he's like breaking government property and then a government agent calls him hot. It's literally like face into my palm levels of cringeness, and I think this is the worst part of the movie for sure. And it's a bummer because it's close to the end. This is where you want to end the movie on a high, and
Which
they kind of recover.
Yeah, they do recover for me at least, because the next scene is Clark goes back to Smallville. His mom's picking up stuff in the house.
What are you going to do when you're not saving the world?
Right. So that sets up him going to Metropolis. But the part that I like about this conversation is how she talks about how Jonathan knew all along that he could bear the weight of the world. And we get this flashback of Clark playing with the laundry where he's wearing the cape, which was pretty heavy in the trailers. And Jonathan is fixing the truck, and we get the Hans Zimmer scene, and he looks off at Clark pretending to be Superman, and the dog's there, and he does the Superman pose. It's like perfect Americana, and she's, like, he knew that you could bear the weight of the world, and he's looking off, like, longingly at his son, kind of like understanding what his son needs to be. And this is actually my favorite scene of the movie.
So powerful.
Dude. I mean, it's very powerful. It's very symbolic. It's very like comic booky, but I think it's wonderful. I think it's shot really well. The music's great in it. Freaking Kevin Costner's got the dirty white T-shirt as he's fixing the truck, and Martha's bringing him lemonade. It's like perfect Midwestern Americana. I love it so much. I think it's really great, and that sets up him wanting to get a job. And the Hans Zimmer score starts to kick in. He goes to the Daily Planet, and Perry's like, Lois and whatever this other asshole's name is. He's like, why don't you just show the new guy the ropes? His name's Kent. And he turns around, he's got the glasses on, and she automatically knows who he is. Again, I have a problem with this, but it works well for this conclusion, because she's like, welcome to the planet. And he's like, pleasure to be here, Lois. And then it goes, and then title card, Man of Steel. We did it.
We did it. We're here. We made it to the end, John. Thank you. You did such a great job recapping.
Yeah, that was hefty. BVS is going to be a train wreck.
I am here for it, my dude. I am here for it.
I think we should definitely, going forward with these episodes, this is like logistics. The listeners can get inside scoop into this. I think we definitely need to hit the big exposition parts, but any action sequences, I think we should breeze over like we did for the sake of time.
I think we did a very good. I think we did a good job. I think this is the format that will continue. Is
For sure.
action sequences we're not going to dive deep into, but plot elements, emotional character stuff we'll be here for. So, thank you, John. I really appreciate you reading that through. That was an excellent retelling. The next time I want to watch Man of Steel, I might just re-listen to your recap instead.
Thanks, dude.
Okay, so do you want
me to do my 3 questions? Yeah.
Go ahead and do your questions, and then we'll get into the rankings.
So I got 3 questions that I want to do with everyone that we do, every movie. So the first is, who won the movie? So director, actor, producer, writer, not the character specifically, because obviously Superman wins, but which person in the making of Man of Steel would you say shines the brightest coming out of it and would be declared as like above the heap for you?
So I've got 2 answers, and the first one's a joke.
Okay, first answer. Give me the joke one.
My first answer would be Christopher Nolan, because he has a story credit and a writing credit, and he got fucking paid, dog. He must have been the easiest fucking check of his life. Like,
because he was not touching this movie.
No, they probably called him on a meeting on speakerphone. They called him on Zoom, and he was like, "Yo, what up, Zach?" And Zach was like, "Yo, Chris, we got a question for you." He's like, "You okay with having a scene where Superman is on a fishing boat and he catches lobsters?" And Chris Nolan's like, "Yeah, you know what? Fuck it, who cares?" And then they got off the Zoom call and they were like, "Okay, $1 million right to Chris Nolan's Cash App account." So. Nice. That's my joke answer. My real answer was, I would love to say Henry Cavill, because I think that he does great in this movie as Clark Kent and Superman. I really like his portrayal, but I'm going to go with Michael Shannon, because he gives a really great performance from beginning to end and is a really great bad guy. And I think that, history will look fairly fondly on his portrayal, because most people didn't expect much, but they got a lot out of his. I think that I got a lot out of his portrayal, and I think that, he's not like, I know that you have history with Superman comics, but like for me, Zod is not like a character I ever had
wasn't a household name for it.
Wasn't a household name, and he ended up becoming like what I think of when I think of General Zod now. So that would be my winner.
Okay, so Michael Shannon was actually my answer as well. I think his performance is the most memorable for a majority of people, just because he has a large screen time. He's a good villain. I think he does overshadow Henry Cavill a lot. I think he's a better actor in the scenes that he has. Yeah. But I will add a second one in, since you already talked about it. I think Amy Adams is actually a really big winner of this movie.
Yeah, she would be my runner-up.
This sets up a run for her that's pretty good, where she starts to get involved in sci-fi movies. So she gets involved with Arrival by Denis Villeneuve, which is a fantastic movie. She also starts to get involved in, I think in this year, she also was in American Hustle, which is not a great movie, but she just like started to get in a lot of stuff. And I do think that she represents Lois Lane very well, a lot better than Henry Cavill does Superman, in my opinion. And I think her scenes are really good. And unfortunately, she doesn't have many good scenes outside of this movie. So I do think she wins this one particularly. So real quick, let's just reiterate. What's your favorite scene of the movie?
Well, it's a toss-up, because you giving your emotional recap of the last scene with the final flashback we get of of Kid Clark wearing the cape. And there's that
for sure.
I don't want to understate the moment, because it is that Hans Zimmer score. It's like if you took that score out of it, that scene doesn't even hold nearly as much weight. But when he holds his fists up to his waist and does the Superman pose, there's like a huge bass drop that happens there. Not like a dubstep drop, but there's like this giant, the score just culminates together in that scene, and it's so fucking emotional. But I'm still gonna stick with the Superman flying for the first time. I think that just the dialogue written and the visuals, everything, it's the only moment in the movie where I really have like goosebumps all over my body. I'm like, fucking let's go, Superman, hell yeah. Okay,
so then my third and final question is, what do you rate it? on the Radiovania scale. And this might tie into raking, so maybe you should take over real quick.
Yeah, I'll take over for just a quick sec. There's not much. So the Radiovania patented 20-point scale is, it's a point and a half. So our scale goes from 0 all the way to 10. So 0, 0.51, 1.52, 2.53, and
so on and so forth.
So on and so forth. And so anybody that has listened to Radiovania in the past knows that's how we typically judge things, is on a 10-point scale, is on that like in between 0 to 10 with, point increments in between.
Yeah.
I would like to quickly recap you on. I'm going to do a couple different things. Typically, we look to Rotten Tomatoes a lot of the times, but I'm also going to give some other critic opinions.
Okay.
So on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 56% critic recommendation and a 75% audience score. On Metacritic, which is do you use Metacritic at all
I've
to like look
it.
at? Okay.
I don't use it, but
so Metacritic is a little bit different. Rotten Tomatoes is 56% of critics. If the movie got 56%, which Man of Steel did, on Rotten Tomatoes, that means that 56% of critics gave it a positive review, and then the rest of it was negative. So it's not a 56% bad. It's 56% of people recommend you see the movie.
Yeah. On
Metacritic, what it does, it gives a point average based on what the critics gave it as a score. So like it would take an average of like people gave it an 80, people give it 100, people give it a 5, whatever. And they take that and they deduce it into a single number. Based on 47 critic reviews on Metacritic as of 2013, Man of Steel is a 55. So the highest review was from film.com with an 87. And the lowest review, let's see, the lowest, I got to do some scrolling. The lowest review someone gave it looks like, oh boy, this is bad radio.
That's all good.
A 40. Someone gave it a 40. Variety gave it a 40. So yeah, based on just critical reviews, it's kind of right in the middle. It's a 56% recommendation, and it's a 55 out of 100 average critic score. John, I've done a lot of talking, so where would you rate it? What would you rate it on the patented Radiovania 20-point scale?
I want you to go first.
I would give this movie a solid 7.
Okay.
I think that, it has a lot of problems, but a lot of the problems are nitpicks, and it's frustrating because like I want this movie to be perfect. Like every time I watch it, like from the beginning on to like the halfway point, I'm like, fucking A, this movie, like I love this movie. I really, really enjoy all of this stuff visually and all the characters, and I love what they're giving these people to, like the things they're giving these actors to do. But then you get to the third act, and I start to kind of like have questions, and that's never good for a movie, and the action goes on for so long. So I don't know. I mean, I'm also bringing, like I said before, what I judge when I rate something is I take my critical analysis of something, like what are the decisions that they made that I think are good and what decisions they made are bad. And I also incorporate what I personally liked or what I disliked about it. And so like, if I took all my enjoyment out of the movie, like my personal enjoyment, I could see giving this movie like a 6 or maybe even like somewhere in that spectrum. Like I don't think it's anywhere below a 6 at least, but like just because of how much I enjoy it and the highs are just so high when they happen. And so I would land it at a solid 7 for me.
Okay. So I'm going with the 6.5. For a lot of the same things you said, the action sequences start to get to you after a while. And I think it kind of drags on. This is a 2-hour and 23-minute movie with credits included, but it still feels pretty lengthy when that last battle goes on for a long time. That begins in Smallville and goes all the way up till when Zod gets his neck snapped. But the parts that I enjoy, again, being the first and second act, I think are really good. I think they're handled really well. You can see that that's where the comic book author part of David Goyer comes out, is him tapping into that Superman lore with Jor-El and Costner and Martha Kent and even Lois Lane to an extent in those early acts. And I really enjoyed that part. And I found myself really remembering like how cool I thought it was the first time. And I think it still really holds up. And it makes Man of Steel one of the better DCEU movies to watch because it does have stuff that puts a smile on your face, which is hard to do in the DCEU because it gets really dismal here for a minute, as we will find out on the next episode. And it was just nice to watch it kind of refreshed and being like, man, I forgot how much I like Jor-El, and man, I forgot how much I like Costner's word of wisdom to his son, and man, I forgot how funny Lois Lane is when we first meet her, and like how energetic Henry Cavill is in his first go around as the character. So it's gonna land at a 6.5 for me, and I think it's good. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I definitely have my problems with it, as stated previously, but it's definitely not the worst of the bunch, as we will dive into.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what we'll end on, is that as we go on week by week, we're gonna try our best. Since there's only 2 of us on the show, there's not like a panel of people that can vote and we can have an overwhelming majority. But John and I are gonna try our best to put all differences aside and try to come up with a definitive ranking of the DC universe. And there are 8 movies in it so far, Man of Steel leading all the way to Birds of Prey. And the last question I want to end on before we sign off is, where do you think this is going to end up on the scale?
By the end of our run on the show?
By the end of the run on the entire show, from the beginning to the end. Like, there's 8 slots right now.
I think it could end up anywhere from 2 to 4. And I think that it'll depend on how hard.
Really?
I think that depends on how hard you fight me.
I'm gonna say
it's 1.
No, I'm gonna say it ends at 3.
Okay.
I think looking at this list, there are 2 movies I like better, and that's just what I'm judging it on. Like 2 movies I can see on this list that I would fight for being better than this movie, but everything else I can see just fall.
I'm gonna go ahead and give you a spoiler that I think 3 is a very good spot for it.
Right.
So, yeah, there are 2 movies that I enjoy a little bit more than this as well. So yeah, but we will hash that out at another time. Same bat time, same bat channel, my friend. This was fun. I liked this. It's fun to talk about something that isn't as good as the MCU.
Yeah, it's wrong being, it's unfair because the MCU just keeps knocking dingers out of the park. So
yeah, it's so much better. I don't think we should try to compare it if we can avoid comparing it. I think because there's a league of difference between these. There is a phantom zone of difference between these 2 film franchises. At least the way that this DCEU was developed.
Yeah. So, well, thank you all for joining us. This was a lot of fun, and I hope that we see you back here as soon as we are able to record a next episode. This episode will probably go up. You'll probably be listening to this on like a Tuesday, on this coming Tuesday or Wednesday. We're recording Sunday evening, so I need to have time to sit down and edit. But maybe next week we'll have another episode out whenever we can get a chance to watch the next movie on our list, which is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And John, we will be watching the Ultimate Cut.
Yeah, which I think is like 2 hours and 45 minutes or something. It's that pod might have to be split in 2. We'll see when we get there.
We'll see. I'm not sure where. Do you know where people can?
BVS is essentially,
like, where's it streaming?
I have it on Amazon, so I'll give you my login if you don't have it. but I don't know if you can watch the ultimate cut unless you pirate it or buy it. So I bought the Blu-ray a long time ago, and I have the ultimate cut digital copy. So that's how I'm planning to watch it.
Cool.
Yeah. But I mean, that movie is essentially 5 movies in one. So we could even do 5 episodes if you wanted to.
Oh, I think that we could sit down with, I think we could breeze through it. I think that there's no way.
Alcohol for the next episode for sure. So.
Yeah. I drank a whole gin and tonic. I didn't even refill, so I'm of sound mind and body.
I don't want to be that way when I'm just kidding. Yeah, it sounds good. I'm looking forward to it, dude.
Me too. Follow the show at Radiovania on Twitter, radiovaniashow@gmail.com. If you have questions or if you have any opinions on the DC universe, or there's anything that, like, any scenes or talking points that we might have missed that you want us to go back over, let us know. And go to radiovania.com for the list of all of the episodes if you want to catch up. And we'll see you guys next week or next time.